When you drive an older vehicle, you can make lots of excuses. Sure, it only has 200 horsepower, but 200 horsepower back then, whew, let me tell you, that was a lot. The handling, yeah, it's all right, but you can only make those excuses as long as you haven't driven one of these. Now, lots of people believe that Mazda's two-seater sports car market began with the MX-5 Miata, but they're sorely mistaken. Granted, the MX-5 Miata is a great car, but it doesn't hold a candle to the FD RX-7. Now, the RX-7 came out long before Mazda's MX-5 Miata did. The first Mazda RX-7 came out in 1978, and it was the brand's first mass-produced sports car. It was targeted as an affordable, stylish, lightweight coupe, and when the second generation Mazda RX-7 came out, it was actually known as the poor man's Porsche 944. And when the 90s came around, Japan had a booming economy, which led to the golden era of Japanese sports cars, with cars like the Nissan 300ZX,
the revolutionary new Toyota Supra,
the Mitsubishi 3000 GT,
NSX スカイライン GTR 誕生
and of course this, the FD Mazda RX-7. Now, one of the things that made the FD RX-7 so sought after, so powerful, and also so prone to detonation was this. This is the twin-rotor 13B REW Wankel rotary engine, also known as the flying Dorito, the spinning Dorito, and they're called that because of the triangular shape of the cylinder. It looks like a Dorito spinning around. Now, this engine does have sequential turbochargers, a small one to boost power at low RPM, and a bigger one that spools up when the little brother runs out of breath. Now, this Wankel rotary engine is a little small at only 1.3 liters, but it still has an impressive horsepower output of around 238 to 255 horsepower. No one really knows the exact amount of horsepower that these things make, and around 218 foot-pounds of torque. Power to get the RX-7's tiny little body around the streets or a track. And while that twin rotary engine was known for its explosive acceleration, it was also known for its explosive temperament. Now, that's not necessarily something that you're going to have to worry about in the near future with this model. It does only have 48,000 miles, and a compression check and all that good stuff has been already done to this motor. When that second turbo kicks in at 4,000 RPM, it's like getting hit with an afterburner from a fighter jet. You just launch. And that Wankel rotary engine will rev all the way up to this car's 8,000 RPM red line. 8,000 RPM! This is one of the only cars I've ever driven that has a red line that's that high. Now, 0 to 60 is over with in just under 5 seconds. It's around 4.9 seconds. Not bad for 1993. Mid 200 horsepower may not sound a lot, but then you gotta remember, this thing only weighs around 2,800 pounds. Oh boy. I am not going to tell you how fast that was. Only around 2,800 pounds. That's pretty good considering a newer Nissan 370Z, which is renowned as a lightweight, hard-hitting sports car, weighs 3,300 pounds. The quarter mile is over with in just under 14 seconds in this thing. Now in comparison, a similar year Acura NSX, which costs probably around double what this is going to go for, does 0 to 60 in around 5.5 seconds. This one burns the quarter mile in about 13.5 seconds, as compared to the Acura NSX's just barely under 14 seconds. Now, granted, the FD RX-7 might not have the bold, stately appearance that the NSX does, but the little FD has no problem going around kicking ass and taking names. Now, that special motor was cloaked in something equally as special, the sumptuous and flowing masterpiece that was the FD RX-7's bodywork. And believe it or not, this bodywork actually came from a concept developed in Southern California. And this very pure bodywork design was actually somewhat rare for the time in Japanese culture, but 20-something years later is a rolling museum quality piece of art. Now, the FD Mazda RX-7 arrived in the US in 1992 as the 1993 model. And the one that I graciously have here with me today, thanks to Northeast Auto Imports, is a 1993 Mazda RX-7 R1 US spec car. And the craziest thing about this one is it only has 48,000 miles on it.
Surely you can't be serious.
This thing is completely bone stock with the exception of a Bluetooth radio, which, let's be honest, sometimes it is nice to listen to music as opposed to on the radio. And that's really quite amazing that this thing has no modifications done to it. There aren't many of these cars left in bone stock form. This car is in beautiful running condition. It does have a few blemishes here and there, like a little bit of fading on the roof, rock chips on the lower portion of the car, as well as some on the front bumper, which is to be expected, and a few blemishes on the interior plastics, which one of these things doesn't have that? Now, less than 14,000 examples of the third-gen FD RX-7 were sold in the US during the model's 3-year run. Now, what's equally important as that super engine that's under the hood is what that engine is stuffed in. The chassis of the FD RX-7 is super stiff and it's very, very light. Two very important ingredients if you want to go around a corner fast. Underneath, we have double wishbone suspension that's all aluminum for extra strength and extra weight savings. And that Wankel twin rotary engine is actually located just behind the front axle, giving the FD RX-7 perfect 50-50 weight distribution. And all that means you can carry some serious speed through corners. It's really incredible. Now, that engine is attached to this 5-speed manual transmission. The driving experience just wouldn't be the same with the automatic as it is with this 5-speed manual. The clutch does have a much shorter throw than you'd expect. Then again, this is not a very big interior. There's not a whole lot of room. And I'm sure the Japanese didn't design this vehicle with a 6'5" lanky Jake behind the wheel. I mean, let's be real. Shifts are smooth and crisp and allow you to keep that rotary engine in the perfect rev range to keep those twin turbos spooling. Like that. That is intoxicating. Just be cautious when you're leaning into those corners nice and hard. The RX-7 is nice and lightweight. You can feel everything. It's got great driver feedback, so it feels like you can take corners at any speed. But the very short 95-inch wheelbase also means that you'll spin around quite easily. That's so I've heard. I didn't do that. Woohoo! And one more thing to remember. The RX-7 doesn't have any driver aids at all, besides anti-lock brakes. So that means there's no traction control, there's no stability control, there's no front collision warning, there's no rear collision warning, there's no blind spot monitoring, even though this thing is like driving around in a fishbowl and you can see pretty much everything out of it, but just something to keep in mind, that's all. Jeez, you hear 200 250 or mid 200 horsepower, and you scoff at it nowadays. We're spoiled with 700 horsepower Hellcats and 650 horsepower Z06s and ZL1s, one of which I was just in last week. Good gosh, it's one thing to drive a big heavy muscle car with an engine that could power half a small city under the hood. And with a lot of trick suspension components, they can handle very, very well. But this is such an incredible and visceral experience to toss around something that weighs so little. With all the computers and driver aids and technology that are available in cars today, nothing on the road is this light anymore. They're weighed down with all the electronical nonsense. It's refreshing to drive something that, however fast it goes, it's however fast you made it go. Now, you may remember last year when I drove a 1992 Mazda RX-7 Type R. It was an FD RX-7, same color as this. It was a Type R, and it was a right-hand drive. It was an imported model. And when doing research, there isn't a ton of information out there on what the main differences are between the US spec RX-7 and the JDM spec RX-7. For starters, there's no rear seat in this RX-7. They add the extra seat to the JDM spec cars for tax and insurance reasons over there. In this case, there's no back seat. I couldn't fit in it anyway. And instead, there's some really decent sized storage pockets. That'll come in handy in this thing. The other thing that may or may not be true is the US spec cars have better spec turbochargers than the JDM spec cars. Wow, that's a lot of specs. It really is a surprising and a magical experience driving the FD Mazda RX-7. Once again, a massive shout out to my friends over at Northeast Auto Imports for allowing me to do this review on their 1993 US spec Mazda RX-7. I'll include a link down in the description below to their website so you can check out the wide array of imported JDM vehicles they have for sale. So be sure to subscribe and hit that notification bell if you haven't, and check out my Instagram at DriveHub __ for updates before YouTube. Anyways, guys, that's it for me today. I'll catch you guys in the next one. Happy motoring.